All right, so let's talk about the obstacles that Patanjali presents in the Yoga Sutra and the symptoms that arise from these obstacles. So Patanjali first lays out the obstacles in Sutra 130, and he says there are 9 obstacles standing in your way from achieving the state of mind called yoga. They are illness, mental laziness, doubt, carelessness, laziness, overindulgence, overconfidence, an inability to concentrate, and instability. When you look at these 9 obstacles, you have to look at why these would be obstacles to our yoga practice and our yoga journey. When you think about when you're ill, when you're not feeling well, you don't have the energy to dedicate to yoga practice, whether that be asana or even meditation. When you're not feeling well, it's hard to focus and concentrate. So we have to be healthy. There's a motivation to maintain a healthy body, a healthy mind, so that we can continue in our yoga practices and work towards yoga as a state of being. Mental laziness really speaks back to a lack of focus, a lack of discipline, as do many of these obstacles. If we're not willing to think about things, if we're not willing to keep an open mind, and we're kind of just waiting for other people to tell us what to do, then we're not engaging with the intellect in a way that would allow us to grow and evolve. And of course, we know that growth and evolution only happens when we challenge our thinking, when we open our mind to new possibilities. Doubt comes up all the time in our lives, and if we're doubting ourselves, then we're often holding ourselves back. We're not allowing ourselves to take on the challenges that will allow us to grow and evolve. Carelessness and laziness are going back to those ideas of focus and discipline again. If we're being careless, then we're not really trying to put our best self forward. If we're being lazy, we're not really being disciplined in how we're approaching the way that we're living. Overindulgence leads us to a state of being where our energy isn't managed well, and it can also lead back towards some of the previous obstacles like illness. If we eat too much, we start to not feel well, and then we're not able to focus on our yoga practices. If we overindulge our energy in certain activities, we might drain ourselves of the energy needed later on to dedicate to our practices, to our meditation. If we overschedule ourselves, we might get to the point where we get to the end of the day and there's just no time or energy left for us to dedicate to our practices, and so we just go to sleep because we can't do anything else. So I think overindulgence really speaks to this idea of energy management or moderation and helping us figure out how to live a more balanced life so that we can have space and time in our life for our yoga practices, whatever that looks like for you. Overconfidence speaks directly to ego. We can go back to the kleshas on this one. And when we're overconfident in ourself and our capabilities, then we, again, shut ourselves off to learning and growing and thinking about things in new ways. We don't allow ourselves to learn from our mistakes or even to admit when maybe the way that we're going about things is not the best way. So overconfidence can really blind us to the opportunities sitting right in front of us for growth. And that could be in any aspect of our life. And then we get to these last two. An inability to concentrate as an actual obstacle speaks somewhat to the previous obstacles as well. If we aren't able to manage our energy, if we're not living in a healthy way, if there's way too much going on in our lives, we've overscheduled ourselves, then we might find that we just can't concentrate. And if we can't develop concentration, which is one of the key aspects of Patanjali's 8 limbs, then we're going to have a hard time going any further on our journey through to meditation. So sometimes there are people who really truly do struggle with meditation. And a lot of times that goes back to this inability to concentrate as an obstacle. And of course, this one is not something where we can just be like, oh, well, here are these techniques that I can teach you to try and help you better concentrate. This is more about standing back and really looking at your life holistically overall to see what changes you can make in different ways, in different areas of your life, so that you can give yourself the space and the time that you need to better concentrate. And that might mean going back to overindulgence and looking at how you're managing your energy throughout the day. How are you managing your time? What are you eating? What are the activities and the people that you're surrounding yourself with or choosing to do? And how is that distracting you or scattering your energies? Are you able to focus on one particular thing? Are you clear on what it is that your purpose is and what you really should be spending your time on? All of these questions are things that can help you narrow down your entire life and lifestyle to the point where you are given the space and time so that you can start working towards practices of concentration. And then finally, this last one, instability. That instability is really speaking to a lack of concentration and thus a lack of skill in meditating. So the idea here being that Patanjali is arguing throughout the entire Yoga Sutra, meditation is really what's going to get us towards these higher states of consciousness. And if we're not able to meditate, we'll never be able to reach those higher states of consciousness. That instability in our life, that inability to find stability in our life through our yoga practices really is going to stand in our way of finding our way to those different higher states of consciousness. So all of these obstacles are really obstacles that we might be interacting with on a daily basis. There might be one, there might be many, and they're deep, they're embedded within ourselves, and they might not necessarily be obvious other than illness. Like if we're not feeling well, it's pretty obvious that we're not feeling well. But what Patanjali does is in Sutra 131 is he lists the symptoms that we might actually experience when these obstacles are present in our life. And these symptoms are very clear, and I think we've all experienced aspects of these symptoms before, or maybe even all of them at once. So Sutra 131 says there are 4 symptoms that result from experiencing these obstacles. They are pain, negative thinking, restlessness in the body, and irregular breathing. We've all had experiences of pain. That might be musculoskeletal pain, that might be emotional pain or mental anguish. We've all suffered from bouts of negative thinking, and that goes right back to the obstacle of doubt that we mentioned. We might have restlessness in our body. That, I think, really speaks to a mismanagement of our energy. When there's too much energy coursing through our body and we're forcing ourselves to sit at our desks and try and work, or when there's too much mental activity happening and we haven't given ourselves the time and the space through yoga practice to calm ourselves down. And irregular breathing might happen when we're feeling really anxious, or again, we're not giving ourselves space and time throughout the day to rest, or there's just a lot happening in the world. There's a lot of external inputs, a lot of information coming at us. We see this all the time with the state of the news media these days. And that can result in irregular breathing, which sometimes we might not even notice. And so the symptom of not noticing our breath or not being able to take a deep breath is really what Patanjali, I think, is talking about here when he references irregular breathing. Regular breathing would be when we're able to take these nice, full, expansive breaths that expand through the belly and utilize the diaphragm correctly. So if we're experiencing these symptoms of pain, negative thinking, restlessness in the body, or irregular breathing, it's probably because, according to Patanjali, there is an obstacle standing in our way. And we can kind of go back to Sutra 130 and look through this list and really sit down and reflect what might be going on here that's the source of these symptoms of pain, negative thinking, restlessness, or irregular breathing. So what I love about these 4 symptoms is that they also parallel really nicely with the symptoms of stress. When we're stressed, we often have more pain. We get stuck in these cycles of negative thinking. We experience a lot of restlessness in our body. We just can't get comfortable. And we have irregular breathing. There's physiological components in all of these aspects or all of these symptoms that are triggered by stress. And so these obstacles that stand in our way of moving into higher states of consciousness through the path of yoga are also causing us stress. So when you look at these two sutras from that lens of stress, you can see that illness causes stress. Not being challenged in your thinking can cause stress in a different kind of way, because it starts to create this friction between the different parts of yourself. Doubt can cause us a lot of stress. Carelessness and laziness can cause us stress down the road. Overindulgence can cause stress on our systems in our body and in our mind. Overconfidence can lead to not great outcomes in our relationships, and that can cause us stress. And an inability to concentrate and instability can really cause us stress, in that we're not able to regulate our systems and find peace and calm in our life. That again results in these 4 symptoms, but we can also say that just results in stress. So by practicing yoga and reaching these higher states of consciousness, in some ways we're also looking at how do we manage and prevent stress in our lives. And I think that that's a really relevant reading of this particular, or these particular sutras. So how I relate that back to the principles is that the obstacles are really pointing us towards the principles that we can practice to work through those obstacles, overcome those obstacles, prevent those obstacles, and then of course work through and prevent the symptoms that those obstacles create. So if we're able to find steadiness or practice steadiness in our life, then we will prevent that obstacle of instability. If we're able to develop focus and discipline, that will help us overcome the doubt, the carelessness, the laziness, the mental laziness. If we're able to develop strength and commit ourselves to moderation and energy management, then we can work through some of those obstacles like overindulgence or overconfidence that lead us astray from an energetic perspective in our own body and mind. And if we're able to cultivate positivity and possibility, we overcome negative thinking, we overcome the doubt again. So when you're looking at that list of obstacles and when you're looking at the list of symptoms, again, it can be helpful to think about, well, what is the opposite of this? What could I be practicing? What principle could I be putting into place to help me overcome and prevent these obstacles and their symptoms? And it leads us right back to what the whole rest of the sutra is saying, because we've seen these principles throughout the sutra. Steadiness is a huge principle when speaking to asana. Focus and discipline. Discipline is what we see in tapas. We see it in the 8 limbs and in Kriya Yoga. Focus is what the sutra is all about, developing focus. Strength is there in the 3rd chapter. Energy management can also be thought of as brahmacharya and moderation. Thinking positively, Patanjali expounds upon that as well in overcoming negative thinking around when he's talking around the 8 limbs. And then of course, possibility is a huge overarching theme of the sutra. So coming back to these foundational principles helps us overcome the obstacles and the symptoms. And I think that that's what makes the sutra so complete as a text, as a practice, as a process, as a progression. It's holistic. It applies to everything, and it keeps coming back to itself and pointing back to itself over and over again. So I hope that you found this helpful in understanding these 2 particular sutras, and I hope that you can find practical ways to really start cultivating these principles and noticing when these obstacles and their symptoms are present in your own life.